Now, I believe that I've covered most of the ships that are available in the game. Now, of course, there's going to be more ships added in the future, but usually most ships do remain the same for a very long time. Now, the Barghest and the Nestor seem to be having changes done to them with every new patch. So far, they have been really good changes. The spacepan has been improved, the Nestor has been massively improved, and today I will jump back in the Bargas and I will show you how the ship has improved, and we will see how much better it performs after all of the different updates. And this is the CyberX Nanocore, the newest one. Okay, time to take a look at the ship stats. Now, the large missile torpedo explosion velocity has been changed from plus 5% to plus 7.5%, which should be a very nice improvement. Now, I believe that the Typhoon 2 still has much better missile damage application. However, the Barghest has higher alpha damage and the Barghest has overall higher paper DPS, so it will be very interesting to see how this ship will perform with this new change, but overall the stats are still really nice. Now, the Barghest's module layout is still the same. Very nice to have 5 medium slots, really good for PvP. The defense is 109,000, the Barghest is still a shield tank. The capacitor on the Barghest remains the same. However, I would like to add that the capacitor on the module ships is not the best. The module ships have really bad capacitors, if I have to be honest. Now, the speed has been improved by 15%, which is very nice. Since the Barghest is not the tankiest battleship out there, it does need the extra speed to keep this ship alive. And I believe the extra speed might be one of the best things that has been added to this ship. Now, this Bargas has 2,500 DPS. This is with the normal cruise missiles. They go 19 kilometers per second. They have a decent explosion velocity and radius, and the range is also really solid, 176 kilometers, which honestly is a really nice value for the cruise missiles. Dual points, scrambler, dual webs, basically the good old PvP setup in the low slots, 1 capacitor battery, 1 booster, dual ballistic controls, and 1 micro warp drive. Now, the rigs on the ship, I believe, are still the same. 4 big combat integration modules that are focused on maximum missile performance. When I built this ship, I thought to myself, well, what can I do with the missiles? They already are pretty good. Well, I just decided to go and improve them even more, and this is a combination of explosion velocity, rate of fire, alpha damage, and explosion radius reduction, which will improve the damage application even more. Really nice if you like to use this ship against smaller targets like frigates, cruisers, battlecruisers, and things like that. Okay, now let me undock and let me show you the DPS of this Barghest, and then I will also show you the other missile types and some other builds that you can use on the spacepan. Still one of the most unique looking ships in the game. Okay, let's orbit the station. Micro warp drive on. Very excited to see the speed on this ship after the speed buff. Now, this is the CyberX Nanocore, which does look very nice. Does make your ship a little bit transparent, which is a very nice touch on the whole. Overall, very interesting. Okay, let's take a look at the ship's velocity, 1.7 kilometers per second. Very nice improvement, honestly, from 1,400 to 1,700. Very nice. I like fast ships. Now, as for the implant, the warhead charge implant is the way to go for the Barghest. You can swap between range and precision missiles, which is going to be very useful. And I like to use explosive and thermal warheads. Explosive against armors and hulls, thermal against shields. The general units are focused on maximum possible DPS this time around, but overall you can focus them on tank or you can focus them on shield boosters, depending on what you need them for. Okay, well, this might be a good screenshot right here. Overall, very nice to look at the CyberX Nanocores. Very expensive. I don't use them, but honestly, they're still very nice to look at. Overall, design-wise, very, very nice work. Okay, now back to the ship. 3095 DPS with explosive missiles. Can be easily countered by reactive hardeners, so be careful with that. And with one ballistic control, the DPS 3.7,000, and with the second one, the DPS is 4.4,000. Honestly, really good, especially when you look at the range that you can fire the missiles from. 176 kilometers with 4.4,000 DPS. This thing is honestly a monster. If you like the best missile stats, then Mordu ships are the ships for you. However, they are quite expensive and some other ships still do the job just fine. Now with the range mode, 209 kilometers, and with the precision mode, 96.46 meter is the explosion radius, which honestly is pretty good. Should be able to hurt cruisers and battlecruisers very efficiently, and that makes the Barghest even more lethal than it used to be, although we already had implants for a very long time. But now with the buff on the explosion velocity, it makes the Barghest even more lethal, and I am all in for that. After all, this thing costs like 20 billion, so it better be good. Okay, now with rapid missiles, 2,300 DPS, 14 kilometers per second is the velocity, and the explosion radius 81.85 meter, explosion velocity 121 meters, 59.77 kilometer range, which is for rapid missiles really good. Can reach long-range tackle ships without a problem, and can kill them without a problem as well. Now with one ballistic control, 3,400 DPS. With the second one, the DPS is 4,100, a little bit lower than the cruise missiles. However, you get much better damage application and the range will be a little bit lower, which is to be expected, but you should be able to shoot down most ships within that range, and you will be safe against daredevils, you will be safe against interceptors, because you can hit them if you go into the precision mode. I mean in the sniper mode. But with the precision mode you get 40.92 meters explosion radius, which honestly will shred small ships, especially if you take a look at your DPS, which is honestly really impressive with rapid missiles. So you have decent defenses against small ships and you can still do a lot of damage to big ships. So far the Barghest is looking pretty good. Okay, now let's take out the Torpedo Barghest, the Troll Barghest. Now I don't usually like to run torpedoes on model ships because, well, they're expensive. I did have a Torpedo Troll Ortus which worked fine but was very risky. 2,900 DPS with the torpedo launchers. Now the torpedo launchers are mostly designed for big ships like battlecruisers and battleships. They will have shorter range, 34.64 kilometers. slower flight velocity, 8.9 km per second, much higher explosion radius, 263, and the explosion velocity will be 123 meters per second. So generally speaking, good against big, slow-moving targets. Now 3,600 DPS with the explosive missiles. This is getting pretty scary now. With the first ballistic control, the DPS is 4,400, and with the second one, the DPS is 5,200. Honestly, really good hot DPS on the torpedoes at 34.64 kilometers. So technically you can be at a medium range distance from the target, and technically you can avoid a Barghest with this current setup, which is very impressive. Now with the range mode, 45.03 kilometers on the torpedo launchers. Now in the range mode you can easily maintain a safe distance from a Balgorn, and that means you will not have to worry about the vampire battleship. And with the precision mode, explosion radius is 132 meters, and that should technically do a lot of damage to cruisers and battlecruisers. However, interceptors will be safe, so be careful with that. Now, you can go with a tanky build. However, the Barghest is, like I mentioned before, not the tankiest battleship out there. It has only 5 low slots, so you can't really expect this thing to be really tanky. The model ships are mostly snipers, so don't really go with a tanky build. It's possible to make it tanky even if you go and change the rigs to tank rigs, but in the end 5 low slots will be a big limit to what you can do on this ship. Now the Bargas has a lot of shield, so that's one good thing about the tank on this ship. And as you can see, the resistance types are not the best. Of course, this is with a DPS build, but even with a tanky build, the Bargas does not feel to be that tanky. Older ships like the Balgorn do feel much more tankier than this. But the main thing about the Bargas is definitely the DPS, the range, and the speed. The Bargas is a very interesting little ship. Okay, now you can also do a build with dual boosters, however this will take a big impact on the capacitor, and keep in mind the capacitor on the Bargas is not the best, so I wouldn't personally go with a dual booster build. One booster and one capacitor battery with the dual ballistic controls is more than enough to make the ship shine. Now you can also do a sniper build with the Bargas with the missile guidance computers, and this is where you can do some magic with the implant, and with general units you can extend the missile range, or you can increase the missile damage application. Now I like to increase the missile damage application, that way I can apply a lot more damage to the target, but in some cases having extra range is also very nice. So here I will show you different setups that you can use with the implants, and different setups with different results that you get with the missile guidance computers. So the first test will be with the missile damage application. Now I usually say that the missile implant is one of my favorites because it's very interesting. You have a lot of options and a lot of modes to play around with. There's a lot of combinations that you can do. So I'll show you some of my favorites here. 2,900 DPS with explosive missiles, now with the extended range 45.3, and with extra application 115 meters, so this has been improved quite a bit already. Now it's 55.51 meters, and with the second one active it's 31 meters. Now this can actually hurt frigates really badly once you have both computers active and when you go into the precision mode of the implant. This can be a serious threat even to smaller ships now, especially if they're webbed and scrambled. When they're slowed down, when they can't move, you will apply a lot more damage. So the Barghest with torpedoes is now a scary thing. It used to be also scary before, but now it's even more terrifying. Okay, now let me go and swap the unit into the range unit. Now I will have a lot more range. Now the Barghest is known to have really good range, and it's meant to be used as a long range ship. So let's say you want to use torpedoes and you also want to have that nice DPS against battleships, but at the same time you also want to have good range to be able to avoid the enemy incoming fire, from the enemy ship. You can do that, and I will show you how. So let's go into the long range mode. 64.82 kilometers on torpedo launchers. Very nice. With this setup you should get some really crazy range. 110 kilometer range, okay. And with the second one, 150 kilometer range with bloody torpedo launchers. Well, I mean, if you want to kill that Balgorn from 100 kilometers with this thing, you can do that very easily. The DPS will be a little bit lower because the precision mode and the sniper mode do reduce the DPS, but you get extra range and you get extra application. Extra range is so far a valid option. Okay, now we have rapid missiles, and the DPS with rapid missiles will be the lowest. However, the range is going to be really high because currently I have the range unit installed with one computer, 190 kilometers, and with the second one 258 kilometers. So no tackle ship, no tackle frigate, no tackle interceptor, no daredevil, no Garmur can be safe tackling this thing with this setup. And of course, because the Barghest has very good application, that frigate that tries to tackle your Barghest will be dead in couple hits. So yeah, with rapid missiles you get crazy range and crazy application. However, the DPS will be a little bit lower. Should be enough to deal with smaller ships. Now, let's take a look at the rapid missiles when I change the unit into the precision one, and this is going to be doom for small ships. Let's see how much I can reduce the missile explosion radius on this thing. Now it will sacrifice range, but at the same time you do have the implant where you can change the mode into the long range mode, so you can compensate for the lack of range. But 59 kilometers should be enough. 35.73 meters is the explosion radius. Okay, with first computer active it's 17 meters, and with the second one it's 9.64 meters explosion radius. 209 meters per second is the explosion velocity. Well, if you don't like that one tackle interceptor, well, this is the build to go, because I'm pretty sure no interceptor wants to get hit by this thing. If they get webbed, they're dead. Basically, that's what happens. Although I'm pretty sure you don't have to web the target to kill them with something as ridiculous as this. Okay, so you might be wondering, what is my favorite setup? Well, it's honestly a little bit difficult to decide. 22.73 meters on the cruise missiles with the precision mode on 176 kilometers. This can also shred smaller ships. 19 kilometer per second missiles. Okay then, well, so far I'm personally very impressed by the Barghest. Now let me swap the implant, let me swap the general unit again, so that I show you the last missile stat over here, and that is the range. Now, if the default range is 176 kilometers, what do you think? What's the range going to be with the general unit active on this ship? Well, only one way to find out. Although I believe the range should be about, let's say, 760 kilometers, because I already did this once, but just to check if the developers did change something. 329 kilometers. Okay then. This is without the computers active. 560 with one computer active, and with the second one it's 760 kilometers. Yeah, you are not going to be missing on anything with this range, and 19 kilometer per second missiles. Yeah, it will take a while to reach the target, but it will reach the target at one point. Okay, so let me go back to the Torpedo build and let me show you the CyberX Nanocore. Now, I personally don't really like this Nanocore because it gives extra stabs, and you know what I say about stabs. I am a pilot that does not like stabs. I believe that stabs ruin the game, and giving players extra stabs is not the way to go, because we already have ships with like, I don't know, like 80 stabs or something. So having extra stabs, yeah, it's something that I don't really like to see. And we have the extra medium slot on the 5th attribute, which is more of a gimmick, to be honest, because one medium slot doesn't really change much. It will have like 6 slots. It's still a paper ship, so it will die the same way. But overall, the main thing about this Nanocore is its design. It's truly a very, very good looking Nanocore, and I believe most players did get the Nanocore for the looks, not for the stats. The rest of the attributes on the Nanocore are okay. They're not really overpowered in that way as you would expect, because mostly, as some of my friends say, it's more of a utility core. You basically get a lot of things, not a lot of DPS, but you get a lot of utility that you can use. Overall, in that aspect, it's nice, but it's really nothing spectacular. For example, the Glacier core, the Porcelain core, the Blue and White core, whatever you wanna call it, that one, for example, is pretty broken, and I don't like that core at all, because it's very easy to escape situations that should not be, that easy to escape. One click escape, basically, that's what the Porcelain core does. This core is not like that. However, you get a lot of stabs, so yeah, it's not really something that I like to see on a new Nanocore. But it's, in the end, not really as bad as some of the other cores. So if you like the core for the looks, then go for it. I like the core for the looks. However, I did not buy it because I don't really like to see 1,000 stabs on ships. Okay, now my apologies for that. I just had to say what I think about the Nanocore because I know a lot of players have a question about the Nanocore, so that was my honest opinion on the Nanocore. It looks good, but the stats are average. So other cores for stats are actually a lot better. Now, how does the space span perform? Well, I'm slapping the ships for 24,000 alphas, so I'm not complaining about the alpha damage on this thing. Now, what's the difference what's the difference before and after? Before the patch, before the buff, I used to nail about 18,000, 19,000 alphas, and you know, it's definitely noticeable. The difference is there, and I'm quite happy that the difference is there. It's going to be a very funny little effect on the mind, because it might appear like it's a lot, but it's only plus like 5,000 extra alpha damage from like average 18,000 to average, I don't know, 25,000, which honestly is a very nice increase. Don't get me wrong, it's a pretty nice buff, which means that I will have to go and check out the Typhoon 2 again, because I'm pretty sure the space span does do a lot more alpha than the Typhoon 2 now, which can be justified by the price of this ship. After all, this thing costs like 20 billion. The Typhoon 2 costs 1.5 billion. However, I will say this, the Typhoon 2 still is a much better investment, because in the end the difference in ISK is not going to be that big, and your wallet will be much happier if you buy a Typhoon 2 than if you go and buy a Barghest. Let's not even go into the scenario where you accidentally lose the Barghest. Losing this thing hurts a lot, and this is one of those ships where a player might actually quit if they end up losing it. If you lose a Typhoon 2, well, it's not a big deal, easy to replace. It's a cheaper ship compared to this thing over here, and a much more, I would say, much more friendlier ship, because it overall has some advantages over the Pan. For example, the Typhoon 2 is much faster. The Typhoon 2 has much better application, which means that even though the paper DPS will be significantly different, because, well, the space pen after all is a Mordor ship, and Mordor ships are known to have the highest alpha damage on missiles. The Typhoon 2 in some situations, especially in PvP, will outperform the Pan, because you will one-hit frigates with the Typhoon 2 even with 1,500 DPS because of its amazing application. With the Space Pen, I'm not really sure if you can really one-shot them, or it will be a 3-hit kill or similar, but against smaller ships in PvP, the Typhoon 2 would definitely pull its own weight over the Pan. And for me, as a PvP pilot, I usually aim to fly a ship that can deal with a lot of targets at once. And for that aspect, the Typhoon 2 is definitely going to be my choice. However, again, don't get me wrong, I love both ships, I fly both ships, and both ships have their respective place in the game. Of course, in the end, it all depends on the player. The ship is as good as the player allows it to be. A bad player is going to fly a good ship in a bad way. A good player makes a bad ship work. Doesn't matter what type of ship it is. So that's the type of logic that I like to follow, and so far that type of logic seems to be working really well, because I did fly some ships that were considered bad and I made them work, and I still fly them to this day. Okay, well, the first couple waves were actually really easy with the spacepan. Honestly, I do feel the difference in the buff. Now, would I still increase the performance of the spacepan? Probably. Although I wouldn't be increasing the ship's paper DPS or anything like that. I think that the spacepan still lacks a little bit more speed, because flying this thing without a tank, or even with a tank, is still quite the risk. Now, the extra speed does feel really nice. It's almost as fast as, I think, almost as fast as a Macarial, although the Macarial is still a lot faster. If the ship was going about 2000 meters per second, I think that would be the ideal speed for this ship. However, I think you can get that speed if you go with the Afterburner or Micro-Drift general units, and that's one thing that I did not equip, so there's a chance that the spacepan is in the right spot now. Now, with rapid missiles, as you can see, the alpha damage has been drastically reduced. However, the rate of fire has been improved, and the overall missile damage application on smaller targets has been improved as well. Now, one thing that I forgot to talk about is the missile types, the implant. What damage I use on shield, what damage I use on armor and hull. Now, with the cruise missiles, you can easily use explosive missiles against shields, because you already have crazy alpha damage. However, against shields, I still like to prefer thermal or EM missiles, because shields have low res against EM or thermal. Against hulls, armors, kinetic or explosive, because hulls and armors have... Actually, hull has the same resistance against everything, so against, I guess, armor, you can use explosive or kinetic, because armor has a hole on that resistance type. Now, against ships that use reactive hardeners, I wouldn't be using the implant, because that way the target can counter the damage quite a bit actually, because works really well against single or dual weapon damage types. And I would go put the missile in the normal mode, that way I will have omni damage and the reactive will not work that well. Once the tank of the enemy is broken, then you go and use a focused damage type, thermal or explosive, EM, kinetic, depends on what type of layout you have on your ship. Now, the rapid missiles with the afterburner seem to be working really well so far. And one thing that I think I also forgot to mention, my apologies if I sound a little bit weird, I'm recording this at 4 AM, I'm really sleepy, and perhaps you might notice I struggle to put a proper sentence, so my apologies for that. I'm trying not to fall asleep, basically, and I think I'm doing a good job on that. With the afterburner, you have about 800 meters per second speed, and in low sec this is a lot this is very risky. In low sec, you can easily use the cruise missiles with long range. Even you can go ultra long range with 350 kilometer with like 350 kilometer missile range, and do a manual orbit with a micro overdrive. No ship can catch that. Even if someone does the double warp trick, they will still be far behind your ship, because you are going to be constantly moving.
Warp drive active.
So surprisingly, as much as it's risky to fly this in low sec, it's actually one of the safer options for a storyline mission, and I will actually show you how that's done in one of the next videos. I plan to run a storyline mission with the Barghest using the long-range sniper build, just to give you a good example of one safe way how to deal with those pirates that hunt in low sec, like myself, because well, I like to help players if I possibly can, and I have a lot of experience in low sec, a lot of experience hunting, so I know what's going to be countering my own ships very well, and I think you will really like to see how that works, and I'm more than happy to actually show you that. Now I have swapped to the torpedo launchers with the Barghest, and honestly the torpedoes actually go in, like they do a lot of damage, which is something that I did not really expect to see against small ships. But with the precision mode and with explosive missiles, you do eliminate the ships in the mission, even small ships, quite in a speedy way, which makes me very curious how would this actually behave against a player ship. Now I know if the ship is moving very fast, then I can forget about applying damage, but let's say the ship is webbed and scrambled. After all, don't forget that the spaceman has a bonus on scrambler range and strength, of course, 21 kilometers scrambler range. So ships that want to go and scramble you have to go within your range first. So that means if they have a micro overdrive, they will lose a lot of speed, and if they get webbed, they will be slowed down by a lot, and then your missiles will apply most of their damage. So perhaps a torpedo Barghest is not such a crazy idea anymore. You know, I have a lot of these ideas that unfortunately I don't have so many chances to actually show them in PvP, because I really have to go and decide on what's my primary ship going to be at one point. So that's the thing that I have a problem with right now. There's a lot of ships that I want to fly, and I just can't decide which one to take out. But my experience with the Bargas after the November update, after the buff, is really positive, really good. This ship now is much more worth for its price. 20 billion ISK, now it's a lot more justified. The space pen in real use, in real combat, does seem to be improved a lot, and I'm honestly very happy with this ship. If you plan to go and buy a space pen, I would recommend you can do that. However, also keep in mind that there's other ships that use missiles that cost 10 times less. That probably will give you a little bit less ISK per hour, but at the same time your wallet will be much happier if you choose the other missile ships instead of the space pen. But if you like the space pen, then You can go and buy the ship. It's again amazing, works really well, and overall I'm pretty happy with the results. With that being said, hope that you enjoyed. My apologies if I sounded a little bit off in this video. I will try to record when I'm actually not falling asleep. So with that being said, this was a sleepy version of me today, and well, hopefully next time will be better. So stay safe, fly safe, good night, and I'll see you next time.